This is the third and final interview of NDP leadership candidates in Alberta. And today I'm going to be talking to Sarah Hoffman. She was the Deputy Premier and Minister of Health from 2015 to 2019 under the Rachel Notley government. And today we're going to be talking about climate and energy policy. So welcome to the interview, Sarah.
Thanks for having me on, Markham. I'm really excited to be able to talk more about my ideas.
Well, this is on your website, and viewers can go there to check it out in more detail, but it's a fairly comprehensive program. We're not going to get through it all in this interview, but there are some things in here that really stood out for me because of uh, in our reporting of Alberta oil and gas, the Alberta Energy Regulator is front and center.
Yeah.
And some of your fellow candidates have called for a review or an inquiry into it. You're calling for a wholesale rebuild of it. What do you mean by that?
I don't, I think the days of an inquiry are gone. I think that we know that it's broken and that we need to make sure that we have responsible folks that represent a variety of interests. Right now, it's fully funded by industry. Industry dominates the membership on there. I don't think that that's fair or in the public interest. Most of my exposure to regulators in the past was around professional associations. I understand the industry and, doctors are different, but the principle behind the College of Physicians and Surgeons, is that it's a mix of people who are appointed by the sector, by doctors themselves, and people who are appointed by government to represent patients, other professional associations that might have to interact with them, that it be more representative of the public. And I think we need to get to that with the AER to make sure that we have a mix of interests and perspectives, so that we can all have confidence in the work that they do. And I think that it's been completely undermined by the way that conservatives have set it up in the past. And I think it's important that we have a reboot on that. So I'd be very excited to hit the ground running. And I'm not going to waste time doing an inquiry into something that we know is already broken.
For viewers, you should know that the AER board is comprised almost entirely, and I say almost because there might be one person whose background I'm not entirely familiar with, but the rest were all oil and gas consultants.
Yeah.
It's completely and utterly dominated. There are no Indigenous people. There's no farmers, landowners, other stakeholders involved at all. It's entirely industry dominated. But you belong to a government. You sat in cabinet for 4 years when the AER was still, it actually was fairly young at that time. Why didn't the Notley government tackle this?
I can't speak to specifics. It wasn't my file, to be very frank. I was very focused on making sure that we had strong public health care and that it was on track. And I'm really proud of my record during that time, and the fact that we cut wait times for breast cancer and other initiatives. Now I'm running to be the premier, and I want you to know that I've thought about what my three biggest priority areas will be, and healthcare continues to be one of them. So it's up there. Climate is my also one of those top three priorities, and energy has a big part to do with that, and housing. So this is one of my top three priorities, and I've taken the time over the last 9 years to get to know the sector a lot better, and I'm ready to hit the ground running.
Fair enough. And let's talk about cleaning up the orphan well problem, the inactive well problem.
Yeah,
And by my count, out of the 465,000 wells in Alberta, there are now 80,000 inactive wells, and there are about 155,000 that are active, but 60% of those, about 95,000, are going to become inactive in the very near
right.
future. They're marginal wells.
Yeah.
What would a Hoffman government do to clean up what is arguably a crisis in the industry?
Yeah, so it's important that we have a plan to make sure that we get rid of any inactive wells for landowners and for others who care about preserving natural landscapes and ecosystems. So I think that we probably need to fast track it at least tenfold, probably 30-fold, based on the math that I think you just put out there, to make sure that we have a plan to I believe in the polluter pay principle, and I think most Albertans do, that if you're going to profit from building a well, when you're done taking out those profits, you need to make sure that it's restored to its state of which it was before, or even better. So that's what I want to get back to. I think the government needs to do a proper public accounting of exactly how many are currently inactive and how many will be inactive over the next 30 years, as you've just done some great ballpark math. And then we need to make sure that we're holding industry to account on actually having regular updates on that so that we can get there in a reasonable time frame. We're not going to rush and do it all in the last 10 years. We need to make sure we're chipping away at it right now. The best day to plant a tree, I forget who told me this, but the best day to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best day is today. So let's make sure that we're building a plan to address those inactive wells and orphaned wells to make sure that we can get full capacity out of the land that still is there.
Now, you mentioned that climate was one of your priorities, and you have a very interesting proposal to replace the federal carbon tax with a cap and trade system. But you'd also, that would also include the oil and gas emissions cap, the methane regulations, clean electricity regulation, tier, the Alberta Industrial Emitters Tax would become part of this cap and trade system. That's pretty controversial. It's a big change from the system they have now. What led you to believe that we needed a whole new system as opposed to an improvement of what's in place or soon coming?
So when I was at the cabinet table in 2015 and we landed on having a consumer-based carbon price, there was lots of economics behind it that said it was going to work. But we haven't actually seen real reductions, and we also haven't seen buy-in from the public on this. And when I door knock all across this province, people tell me that they want their kids to be able to breathe the air, that they're worried about the wildfires. They tell me that they're concerned about drought, that they want to make sure that we have a strong economy for the rest of their earning career and for their children's earning career. And I believe that Albertans want us to address climate change, but the consumer-based carbon tax has become so politicized by many, including our prime minister, who took over the Alberta, developed an Alberta plan when Jason Kenney threw it out, but then they broke it, right? Like they decided to exempt home heating fuels for the East Coast. That wasn't going to grow confidence in what already was a tough sell. So rather than continuing to fight this fight that I would say hasn't proven to be effective and has been undermined by other orders of government, I think it's important that we move forward with new tools. And I know that we can do it here in Alberta and that people want to take serious action. So making sure that we roll into here, that we develop a cap and trade model that makes sure that we achieve meaningful reductions, and that whatever money is being generated is going towards helping people reduce their energy costs and their bills, I think should be the goal of a government. I think we can work with industry to make sure that they are profitable, but I think if we're going to be investing public money, it should be to help the public.
You'll have to clarify this for me because there are basically two forms of carbon pricing. One is cap and trade, and the other is the carbon tax.
Mhm.
And so if you remove the consumer carbon tax, and several of your other candidates the other candidates are proposing something similar, and and there are economists who support that kind of idea. So, but if you replace it with another form of carbon pricing, which is the cap and trade system, how does that get over the public aversion to carbon pricing in the first place? Help me understand that.
Well, I think that this has been hyper politicized, and that people have big walls up around the concept of a consumer-based carbon tax. So fine, let's make sure that we're enacting meaningful change, that we're actually going to have 35% reductions by 2035, which would help meet our national objectives and our global responsibility. And let's make sure that we have a price that's tied to the largest polluters, and that the revenue that we generate helps families reduce their own costs. So I'm fine with working with the economists, working with industry to make sure that we can get buy-in and that we can actually achieve our goals, which is making sure kids can play outside on a hot summer's day, that we can all breathe the air with confidence without worrying about where our next paycheck's going to come from because of having a government that's put its head in the sand and refuses to take action on climate change.
Now, generally, when we talk about alternatives to carbon pricing, we're talking about subsidies, we're talking about regulations, sales mandates. There are a number of policy tools that don't include carbon pricing. You've got some of them in your program. Can you tell us about those approaches?
Let's start with electric vehicles. Is that one that would meet your sort of goal around this
Sure.
concept? Yeah. So the current government's decided that they want to charge a levy or an additional tax every single year when you register your electric vehicle. I want to get rid of that and actually bring in rebates. We've seen in many jurisdictions, Europe, many European countries, where they've significantly transformed the commuter car to be an electric vehicle dominant sector. So that is absolutely possible. I also want to take some of that money that we're generating through cap and trade and holding the heavy polluters responsible to install electric vehicle charging stations on major highways to support municipalities and putting more in. And with that, I also want to make sure that we're setting up a crown corporation so that people can get around Alberta on different forms of public transit. And maybe it won't be back to the old school Greyhound days. Maybe there will be more innovative ways for us to move people around the province. But the fact that we have so many people in this province who can't get into Edmonton or Calgary for a major doctor's appointment unless they count on the generosity of a friend or a neighbor or spend hundreds of dollars to take a cab is completely irresponsible, and it's bad for the environment, it's bad for climate policy, and it's not focused on the people of this province we're here to serve. So helping people be able to get around with a smaller carbon footprint is one of my goals, and I know that it's doable because I've been looking at what's happening in other jurisdictions. And I'll maybe mention one more, and that's solar for all. I think anyone who wants to be able to put modules up on their roof, help reduce some of their consumption, should have the opportunity to do that. And the biggest barrier for people is the cost up front. So rather than saying, this will pay for itself over the next 40 years, I want to give people money up front to be able to help them reduce their costs and then have them pay that off in a longer period of time. So um, again, we can take these ideas from other jurisdictions that have been leaders on this and we can make them Alberta solutions. And cutting people's costs, this is a big affordability thing. Obviously, this is about emissions and the future of our energy sector, but it's also about making sure that we cut people's bills today.
A couple of days ago, I was talking to a former ASO, Alberta Electric System Operator, grid planner, and he
Mhm.
mentioned that the 14% of renewables on the Alberta grid is already causing problems in terms of reliability and frequency balance is a big issue. Not that I'm an engineer or understand it, but that's his argument, and it's caused by renewables. The solution to that appears to be, and we're looking at other jurisdictions like the US as an example, where you put in a lot of storage. You re-engineer the grid, you add other kinds of power electronics and stuff. Viewers can go to our Energy Talks podcast. I've done almost dozens of interviews about this now, if you want some background information. You mentioned this in your program. Can you expand on that a little bit more about how a Hoffman government would invest in a smart, more robust grid?
Thanks so much. I'm going to tell a couple of stories in relation to this. One is right at the beginning of this leadership campaign, there was a conference in Grand Prairie called Building the North, organized by the Chamber of Commerce. And one of the sessions at that conference, which of course there's a lot of stuff around oil and gas, another one was about lithium extraction from inactive wells and what potential there is to harness lithium from what currently is sitting there as a stagnant, inactive site. And I think these types of initiatives, which of course lithium is fundamental in helping us increase our battery capacity, are fantastic. We are ripe for the picking. There are so many inactive wells here, as you just highlighted, that could be part of the solution to help us gather and harness more of this energy. So that's a big part of it. And the other piece I want to say is that there's been a constant attack on our post-secondary institutions, and we've got some of the best and brightest minds working in energy at the U of A, U of C, and other post-secondary institutions right here in Alberta. And we should be compelling them to be part of the solution with us, that they should be working with us on battery capacity as we used to hire professors to profess to the public at large and to do good for public society. And right now, under Danielle Smith, it seems like a lot of them are being scared out of doing that work. And I want them to be allies in helping us address some of these struggles. And then the last piece I'll say is that we have an opportunity to do more tie-ins with other jurisdictions, including BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, and share when we have surge capacity and rely on each other when we need help from them too.
There is a section in your program that is of great interest to me because here at Energy Media, we have argued long and hard for the transition of the oil sands and its bitumen from providing feedstock for refineries and fuel to feedstocks for an advanced materials manufacturing industry
Mm.
located in Alberta. And that you have mentioned that in your program. So can you expand on that a bit, please?
Yeah, I've always believed that we should get full value for the resources that we have. So whether that is making sure that we're doing more upgrading and refining here in Alberta, whether it's using the byproducts to create new innovative um, tools for us to be able to use in energy or in other sectors. Um, it is completely irresponsible to chop down a tree, ship it south of the border, buy it back as a table, for example. And it's the same with our oil and gas products. So shipping raw bitumen is the lowest form of productivity, and I want to get full value and full jobs for the resources that we have. So I'm with you on that, and thanks for highlighting it.
You've got an interesting idea in your program about creating a youth climate corps. We've seen this
Yay.
other it's been pitched at the national level in Canada. If I remember correctly, President Joe Biden has proposed it for the United States. What did you have in mind here?
It is absolutely modeled off what's happening south of the border because young people, a lot of my nieces and nephews, to be frank, people between 14 and 25 are desperate to be part of the solution. They know that climate is in crisis and they want to be able to take leadership on this and put it into their own hands. So, creating 2-year opportunities for people to become public employees, to sign a contract with the government and say that they want to help do things like build berms or water reservoirs to respond to the impacts of climate change, but also install solar and wind projects. And they're great mortgage paying jobs often that get people on a great path. It's a 2-year contract, so you can have some stability and a plan to be able to grow your resume and take confidence in what you're doing on the climate. So I don't want to lose this young talent and expertise to the United States. I suspect that our friends in British Columbia might have this as part of their election campaign coming up this fall, and I think it's a great idea. So I want to take great ideas from other places and put them to work here. And so many parents, so many people my age and a little bit older, are concerned about their kids and about if they'll have a path to get out of their parents' basement. And this is a great way to do that, and also make sure that we can all have a great quality of life and show leadership on the climate. So I'm excited to take good ideas from other jurisdictions and put them to work right here in Alberta. And this is definitely one. And it's probably one of the things that got young people most excited to buy memberships and to vote for me when it comes to platform initiatives. They don't always want to vote for, expanding healthcare by 1,000 doctors. When you're young, you feel you're invincible when it comes to your own personal health, but they know that we're not invincible as a planet, and they know that we need to take climate action. My nephew specifically was really frustrated that he missed so much soccer last year. And I'm frustrated for him too. So let's address climate change, get him a great job, and make sure that we can have safer air so we can play outside.
Well, part of that is, of course, the burning of coal. Not here in Alberta as much anymore because coal has almost been squeezed out of the uh, power system and will be in the next year or two. We won't have any more coal. It'll be mostly natural gas.
Mhm.
But you argue that there should be no more, there should be a ban on new coal mines.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's controversial or not. Albertans say are very upset about that. I mean, when Corb Lund, for example, the country Western Star, you know, is outspoken about something like this, you've got to think that the public is behind it. What led you to decide on a ban for new coal mines?
Talking to people across this province. I was in Nordegg not that long ago and went for a hike, and at the end, there was somebody on their private property who had a big sign about making sure that we protected the natural landscape in that area and the rest of the eastern slopes. And um, I think one of the things that people move to Alberta for from other provinces or around the world is for our natural landscape, and protecting that I think is really important to us. Also, of course, it ties into questions around air quality, and so often people who resist taking action on climate say, well, other jurisdictions are going to burn our coal anyway, so why wouldn't we? Well, because we're not going to give it to them, because we're going to protect our landscape, we're going to make sure that we protect the air, and we're going to show leadership on this. So I think Albertans generally are quite hungry for this. And I also want to say Nordig isn't exactly in what's seen as like a NDP progressive lefty stronghold. You know, it's been represented by conservatives as long as I've been alive and probably longer. But there are lots of people who would see themselves as conservatives who want to move beyond coal, who want to protect water, who want to protect our landscape. And I'm right there with them. And yeah, coal mining, I don't think has a place in our province anymore.
Now, you've mentioned water a few times, and this is a big issue for a number of my readers and viewers.
Yeah.
And it seems like Alberta is coming into this year will be a crisis, it appears.
Yeah.
And what would you do as premier of the province first of all fix the problem and then ensure that it doesn't come up again in the future?
Yeah. So we do need to re-examine water licenses and how they're distributed. It seems in the past that it's been whoever's got the deepest pockets and gets to the front of the line first. And I don't think, I know that doesn't reflect the values of Albertans. It needs, in my opinion, we need to prioritize human need, then crops, then livestock, and then industry. And I think most people, if you said, what should be your priorities if you didn't know the context, would agree that human need should be number one for sure. Making sure that we have enough feed for livestock and for humans, and then making sure that those livestock have access to the water would be the highest priorities. So we need to recalibrate the way water licenses are distributed and make sure that we're taking care of one another. The other piece is that Youth Climate Corps can absolutely help with making sure that we're finding ways to build more reservoirs and protect the water that we do have. But it is a scarce resource we're learning, and we need to make sure that we reprioritize who gets access to it first.
This will be my final question, Sarah. But we've been arguing for a long time in Energy Media that Canada, but particularly Alberta, because it's the epicenter of the nation's oil and gas industry, needs to have a different conversation around around energy.
Mm.
We're stuck in this old status quo kind of narrative and really aren't paying attention to the accelerating global energy transition and the implications that will have for Alberta if we begin to see, demand destruction for oil and gas in the early 2030s. And I think that's a very real threat these days, according to the IEA. So how would you go about changing that conversation? So we talk differently about the future of oil and gas. We talk differently about developing a clean energy economy, and including the power sector that you've already discussed.
So I grew up in small town northern Alberta, and a lot of people in my community work in oil and gas, work in forestry, and are really proud of the lifestyle it's awarded to them and their families. Also, agriculture is another big one. So Alberta's top three employment sectors: oil and gas, agriculture, and forestry. And I will say that most of those folks that I'm thinking about want to make sure that they can pay their mortgage, that their kids can go to school, that they have a good quality of life. And I want that for all of them too. We've seen so much automation in the oil sands in particular, and a lot of those jobs are going away, regardless of what we're talking about in terms of emissions or those types of things, because so much of the process has been automated over the last few years. So I want to make sure that they have great jobs. And I think that a big area for us to grow has been proven to be in the renewable energy sector. And we were leading the country in wind installations until Danielle Smith put in a moratorium that's turned into a ban. That is not okay. I want those operating engineers who've been working either in the South or in the oil sands to have more opportunities to work as operating engineers and earn a great income. So lifting that ban would be a big piece of my energy focus, day one of a Sarah Hoffman premiership, and making sure that we have strong mortgage paying jobs in a variety of sectors. But energy needs to continue to be a driving force, because not only do those people in Canusa want to be able to pay their mortgage and provide for their family, they also want to have confidence that when they come home at night and turn on the lights, that they're going to come on, that when they fire up their vehicle, it'll go forward and it'll take them to where they need to go. So we need to have a strong energy sector, and we need to make sure we're getting full value from the resources that we do have that are non-renewable, and that we're growing the renewable sector too. So I'm very hopeful and optimistic that we can achieve all of those things and protect the agricultural sector and the forestry sector at the same time, which also rely so much on on the wealth that we have to provide great jobs for the rest of the province and in turn support the rest of the country.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate the interview, and good luck in the June vote.
Thank you so much, Markham. Really nice getting to chat with you a little bit more about this. And if anyone wants to learn more, please visit sarahhoffman.ca.